night in which the president gave a speech about Afghanistan and victory in Afghanistan. Senator, what does victory in Afghanistan look like after 17 years of being there?
Craig, after 16 years in Afghanistan, the president asked, I think, the right questions. What does victory look like, and what are our core interests there? And our core interests are making sure that Afghanistan can't be used as terrain to launch another attack against the United States like we saw in 9/11. There are more foreign terrorist organizations in Afghanistan, the Pakistan borderlands, than anywhere else in the world. And we cannot allow the Taliban to take control of that country again and give freedom of action, freedom of movement to groups like Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State. So we are there focused, as the president said, to kill terrorists and to stop the Taliban from retaking that country. The Afghan people are going to have to work out the kind of government, the kind of society they want to have. That's not our role. Our role is to stop the Taliban and terrorist organizations from targeting us here in the United States.
So you don't, and the president doesn't, and the goal here is not to be a target, to keep the United States from being a target.
Afghanistan is the place from which the 9/11 attacks were launched. It's where the most terrorist organizations in the world are concentrated, and they would like nothing more than to have the freedom of action to deliberately and carefully plan another attack against the United States.
He didn't mention troop strength last night. There was no mention of numbers. What should we expect? How many?
Well, I think that's really a question for the professional judgment of our commanders. I think in the late Bush years and throughout the Obama years, there was too great a focus on troop numbers. We should focus on the mission. And the mission is stopping the Taliban and terrorist organizations from being able to take over territory that they can then use to plot attacks. And if that requires 1,000 troops, that's what our commanders say, then that's what they should get. If it requires 8,000 troops, that's what they should get. If it's something in between, that's what they should get. So I think it's good for the president to be focused on the mission and let the mission drive troop levels and resources, not vice versa.
This just sounds like a whack-a-mole, that if you get one terrorist organization, another one pops up. In fact, we're now even reading that ISIS is going at it with the Taliban in Afghanistan. Is that almost impossible when you consider Afghanistan as the graveyard of empires?
No, it's hard, but it's not impossible. And there was a time in the late Bush years and the early Obama years when we had a lot of success rolling back the Taliban and stopping them from creating the kind of safe havens that you had before 9/11. And as Secretary Mattis said, one of the core principles of war is you go somewhere and you kill your enemy and you keep killing them until they've had enough killing. And that's one thing that's going to be happening in Afghanistan. The president didn't talk at length about this, nor can I in an unclassified setting, but there are going to be changes to the rules of engagement. And the Taliban and the Islamic State and Al-Qaeda and all these other terrorist organizations are going to feel that very soon.
At one point, there was a move by the Afghan government to negotiate with the Taliban. You, on the Armed Services Committee, would you encourage that?
I'm very doubtful about the prospects for negotiating with current high-level Taliban leaders because so many of them have worked so closely and pledged allegiance to terrorist organizations and vice versa. That doesn't mean, though, that in a number of months or maybe a year, once we've accelerated the pace of operations, once we've eliminated a lot of those senior leaders and the Taliban is in a position of weakness, the Afghan government can't reach some kind of negotiated settlement for what is going to happen in that country. But right now, to negotiate with the Taliban, I think would be unwise for us.
Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky wants to rescind the military authorization powers of the presidency. Your reaction to that? He is even planning to introduce that into the Senate.
Well, I think that the president made the right decision to refocus our mission in Afghanistan, and therefore he benefits from the 2001 authorization for the use of military force, and I think it's appropriate that it remain in place. So I wouldn't support repealing that authorization.
I gotcha. What about Arkansans and redeployment? What can you tell us about that? Because you know you've got bases here, National Guardsmen, who are looking at this going, oh gosh, we're going back.
Well, there's obviously going to be some increase in troop levels. What exact number is to be determined and how long is to be determined as well. Arkansas provides more than its share of troops to the Army and the Marines, which are doing most of the fighting in Afghanistan. So you might see some more Arkansans deployed there. Whether it's a whole unit of our National Guard or from the Air Force Base is less likely, but certainly because we have a disproportionate number of people from Arkansas in our military, you're going to see a few more Arkansans going there, and they and their families are going to be in my thoughts and prayers as they are every single day.
It sounds like you're playing a waiting game like we all are to see what's rolled out.
Yeah, and you know the enemy gets a vote as well. So all we can do is focus on what our core national security interest is there, which is to ensure that we're not attacked from Afghanistan the way we were 16 years ago.
Let me switch gears from Afghanistan to domestic policy. As everybody gets back together in September, what is the number one legislative priority?
Well, I would divide that in two. There's things that we must do and things that we can do. The must-do things come up every year, passing a budget and so forth. But there is a real opportunity in the budget this year, which is to increase defense spending. We saw for the second time in a row, or second time in 2 months, a terrible accident in the Western Pacific with one of our Navy destroyers. I suspect that there's no way that the budget cuts to the Navy haven't contributed, at least in part, to a decline in training and in readiness for those sailors. I know, as a member of the Armed Services Committee and a veteran myself, that the budget cuts over the last 8 years have been very hurtful for our military. So I hope when we work on that must-pass legislation, the budget and the bills to fund the government, we'll do the responsible thing, which is increase military spending. But then there's the other category, the can-do opportunities. I introduced legislation last month that would overhaul the way we give out green cards to this in this country, to prioritize high-skilled individuals who can contribute to our economy and fill gaps, like, say, doctors in rural Arkansas. And we have a large number of immigrants from other countries that come here to Arkansas and help provide health care in places like Batesville or Jonesboro or Hot Springs or El Dorado. I think that's a real opportunity. Congress doesn't have to do that. Congress should do that. And I'm working with not just my Republican colleagues, but my Democratic colleagues as well to try to revamp our immigration system.
Won't we need to raise the debt ceiling?
We'll have to do that as well. I hope that's an opportunity to get some kind of reforms to our spending process and our budgeting process. I don't know what that legislation is going to look like, so I can't pass judgment on it yet. But I don't think we should just have a simple, straightforward debt ceiling increase without some effort to try to reform the way we budget and the way we spend, so maybe we don't have to increase the debt ceiling quite so often.
Senator Cotton, thank you for coming in, straightening us out on your stance on all these issues that swirl around us and tend to, at some point, distract us, but at the same time need our concentration.
Thanks, Ray. Great to be with you.
Thank you for coming in.